Chapter I, the mask that whispered to stars I, speak from within the fracture where light has no allegiance, and time no memory. I was once called Jedi. I was once flesh, but the archives devoured me, and in their place I remain, a whisper tethered to a holocron no longer recognized. I speak to you now, across shadow, across stillness, to tell of the first cursed object the Order ever feared, and tried to forget. It fell from no known systema, black star that did not burn, but hung, trembling, in orbit before plummeting into the deserts of what would one day be called Jedi. There were no survivors in its landing radius, and yet no explosion. Just a crater, a wound in the sand that refused to fill. At its center lay a mask, carved from obsidian not found in this quadrant. Its surface rippled with heat, though it sat cold to the touch. It bore no mouth, yet whispered, no eyes, yet saw. The first to retrieve it was a healer named Rals Rin, a Jedi of peace and precision who approached without fear. He returned to the temple days later. Changed, he no longer slept. He no longer blinked. He no longer used his own name. Instead, he spoke in tones the archives did not recognize, languages older than Rakata, older than speech. When questioned, he would only murmur, "The stars are speaking. We just forgot how to listen." His abilities grew. He could predict battle trajectories with unerring clarity, walk into volatile force, storms unscathed, bend illusions across systems. But his aura, his presence in the force rank, like a candle behind a veil of smoke. The Jedi Masters called him to Coruscant for meditation and testing. He refused. He vanished. 3 more Jedi followed his path, each drawn to the crater, each donning the mask, each returning. Less not dark, not fallen, but tilted. Their perceptions skewed, time slowed in their presence. Organic matter around them wilted. Droids malfunctioned. One Padawan said she saw her own death every time she looked at the mask. The High Council sealed the object. Beneath Temple Ossus, they sealed it with iron, then with stone, then with rites carved into bone, rites no longer spoken aloud. But this was before the Clone Wars, before the Cataclysm. Ossus was lost to fire, and with it the seal fractured. The mask-freed eye was there when it was brought again to the surface. I begged them not to unseal it. They laughed. They were young. When the box opened, the chamber grew colder than any system core, not freezing, but subtracting heat, as if warmth had forgotten us. The whispers began at once, not audible, but emotional. Ancient shame, eclipses we never remembered seeing, words that do not translate. I tried to run. I couldn't. My feet dissolved in memory. I was pulled toward the mask, not by gravity, not by the Force, by recognition. It knew me, and worse, I knew it. It is not a weapon, it is not even a tool. It is a door and a mirror. The mask allows one to see the Force not as it is, but as it was meant to be, pure, unfractured, unmade. Those who wear it cannot endure the dissonance between what should be and what is. Their minds stretch, fray, sometimes collapse into silence. Others become ... hosts. One Jedi Master, Irulan Vex, wore it to save a dying world. She vanished mid-sentence. Her voice was later heard echoing from the tombs of Moraban. Her lightsaber turned up centuries later in wild space, on a derelict ship with no crew, orbiting a dead sun. She still speaks to me in my sleep. The stars remember this mask, even when the Jedi do not. The ancient ones, the ones who crafted hyperspace, Lanes with thought alone, they feared the mask. It was not made by them. It came before them. It may not have been made at all. Some claim it is the fossilized thought of a dead god. Others, that it is a fragment of the first lie the Force ever told itself. I am only light. In the deep labyrinths beneath Yavin 4, there is a wall that bleeds only on moonless nights. Carved into it is the shape of the mask. No tools made the carving. No record shows its creation. But every 300 years, the wall pulses and one Jedi disappears from the Order, erased even from memory. I am bound to remember them, even when no one else does. Some seek the mask still. Treasure hunters, Sith cultists, Jedi heretics. They think it will give them power, clarity, immortality. It gives only perspective, and the truth is a poison no one survives. The last known sighting was on the ship Aegis Tempest, traveling through the Maw cluster. It sent out a final log, a recording of stars blinking out one by one, followed by a single phrase, "I have heard the scream of the galaxy forgetting itself." The transmission ended. The ship was never found, and now the whispers grow louder. I have not seen the stars in centuries, yet I feel them turn away. I have not touched a saber in eons, yet I feel one humming in my bones. The mask is closer now, not in space, not in time, but in meaning. You hear it too, don't you? Not with your ears, but with that breath between heartbeats, that hush between thoughts. It is calling, and you are almost ready to answer. Chapter 2. The lightsaber that refused to die. You thought lightsabers were tools of discipline, of light, of purpose. You were taught that each blade reflects the heart of its builder crystal and soul bound in harmony. But not this one. No, not this. This saber was never built. It was born. It came from a sun, a dying star at the edge of no mapped sector, watched by no order, mourned by no species. But something inside that stellar corpse screamed not in heat, not in gravity, but in will. A fracture split open across its corona, and from it a single shard of metal drifted out, impossibly cool. A ship found it, a Jedi named Nera Solon, searching for relics of the First Republic, brought it aboard. She claimed it vibrated with ancient rhythms like song, but composed in grief. Her Padawan begged her to leave it behind. She did not listen. She forged a lightsaber with it. No kyber, no focusing lens. The metal was the crystal when she ignited it for the first time. The walls of her ship melted inward, not with heat but with history. The blade sang, not in tone, in memory. When swung, it cut not only what it touched, but what it had touched. Doors she never opened split apart. Shadows deepened where no light fell. Holocrons that had been erased flickered back. Two lives speaking of futures never lived. Naira grew distant. Her eyes dulled. She claimed the saber showed her lifetime, some where she was Sith, some where she never joined the Order, some where she killed her master and regretted nothing, and then she vanished, left only a single line carved into her. Temple's floor. I am every version of myself the galaxy could not bear. The saber was found decades later in the hands of a Sith named Ven Rakuin. He had bound the blade to his spine, not wielded it, but worn it, as if the saber had grown roots through his nervous system. His movements jittered, his voice skipped, in time sometimes echoing before he spoke. He called it the chronoblade. He claimed it whispered the end of all force lines, light and dark alike. He died laughing, his body turning to salt, the saber unscathed. Still humming, the Jedi recovered it, again but could not turn it off. It hums, still buried beneath the temple of Ilorand, beneath 5 meters of basalt, beneath a force-dampening shell older than recorded war. Still it sings, softly, like a child, remembering fire. Jedi Masters dream of it, though they've never seen it. Some claim they've held it in dreams, cutting through illusions of past lives. Padawans near Ilorand report headaches, nosebleeds, missing time, and sometimes they speak in other voices. What is it that makes a weapon refuse death? Is it hatred? No. Sith weapons are born of rage, but rage ends. Is it memory? No. Jedi blades remember their masters, but only as echoes. This saber is none of these. It is unfinished, a paradox in alloy, a fracture that loops. It seeks a wielder that never lived, a battle that was never fought, an enemy that cannot exist, and until it finds them it will not die. I once tried to touch it in my final days as flesh. I journeyed to Ilorand. I was warned. I went alone. I reached the outer chamber. The air shook not with sound, but anticipation, as if the blade knew I was close, as if it remembered me before I arrived. I reached out through stone, through shielding, through the crust of a planet, and I felt it. It remembered galaxies that have not formed. It remembered me holding it in lifetimes I never lived. It remembered the scream of a Jedi dying in a battle that never happened. And I wept not for the blade, but because I had. The Force does not want this saber to exist. I know this. The Force bends around it like light near a black hole. Even Sith holocrons fracture when it's near. But still, it is there, and what the Jedi buried. The soil does not forget. Temples built over it crumble. Walls collapse without fault. Lines, statues weep rust. Trees near the site bear fruit that bleed light. Animals will not go near. Children born near Ilorand develop twin heartbeats. One real, one echoing. And always, beneath it all, the hum, that soft, endless hum, like a war drum played with silence. They say time is a river, but this saber is the stone that splits its flow. Those who wield it leave wakes not behind them, but in front of them. Some Jedi who touched it claim they've seen the end of the Order, again and again on different planets, by different hands, always inevitable, always burning. Some even saw you, listening now, and what you'll become. You think this is just a legend, that the Force would not allow such a wound to survive. Then listen, close your eyes, listen to the space between your breaths, hear that hum. That's it, it's closer than you think. A sharp flicker of static, then silence, and now we turn our gaze deeper, to the cube that records only those who defied the Order, to the archive that breathes, to the holocron of forgotten sects. It opens next. Chapter 3. The holocron of forgotten sects, crystalline distortion. A slow clicking begins, like teeth grinding against a frozen cube. In the sealed vaults beneath Temple Ossus, there was once a room no master claimed to have built. It pulsed not with life, but with recollection. No doors, no lights, just breathless heat and the quiet rhythm of a cube that never stopped bleeding. The holocron of forgotten sects. Even now, I speak only because it has allowed me to remember, briefly. Terribly it was carved from a red crystal that wept at its corners. Not from cracks. No fractures marred its surface. It bled as if it remembered. Not just the past, but the possibilities that failed. Its surface was etched in 12 dialects. Only 3 still known. The rest, banned, cursed, One dialect causes nightmares when spoken aloud. Another grows tumors in droids. Another erases itself after being heard. The holocron refused to open for any Jedi who held to the code. Only those who questioned it could make it speak. The first to open it was a seer named Shalaton. She had long whispered against the council, said the code had fossilized, that the living force was being caged. Her peers called her dangerous. Her Padawan left her. She vanished for 17 years. Returned alone, holding the cube. She spoke of sects. The archives had never recorded sects that claimed the Jedi were not born of light, but of balance broken. The Jedi of Chaos were the first. Their symbol was a serpent devouring both ends of a saber. They believed the Force should never be controlled, that to channel it was to corrupt it. Their rituals involved surrendering will, letting the Force possess them like a storm. They lived inside Force necks, let the currents rip their minds apart and reassemble them. They created no temples, only wounds in the soil. They vanished one night. Every member, all that remained were their robes. Still warm, still humming with presence. The whispered hand came next, born during the 100-year darkness. They rejected lights, saw them as lies, tools that forced form upon the formless. They fought with silence, gestures. The Force itself became their blade. They spoke in sin, meditated underwater to slow thought. One of their masters is still believed to exist, suspended in an airless crypt, whispering spells into their own skull. They did not fall in battle. They fell when one of them learned to speak again. The holocron wept when it recounted this. And then the Dawnless Circle, a sect that believed light was the illusion, that the Force's original state was twilight. They trained in caves lit only by memory. They mapped shadow as others map stars. They walked blindfolded for decades, trusting only the Force to guide them. They created a ritual known only as the Unseeing. After it, no member remembered their name. No one remembered why the ritual existed. One Jedi tried to replicate it. He awoke blind in the Force, not cut off. Worse, the Force still flowed around him, but never again to him. Each of these sects fell, not in war, but by summoning something old, something deep. The holocron shows only fragments, a sigil traced in fire, suspended in water, a scream recorded in bone, a door made of eyes, opening into a desert of stars. It will not show more, not unless you to begin to question. And I was once assigned to guard the vault that held it. They told me, do not listen when it speaks. Do not touch it with doubt in your heart. Do not stay near it too long. I listened, I obeyed, until I didn't. I touched it, and the voice that came was not a voice. It was a place. I stood inside the cube, or it stood inside me. The temple around me dissolved, not in destruction, but in irrelevance. I was standing in Asus, but I was also on Tython and Jeddah, and a world made only of mirrors. I saw Jedi who wore no robes, Jedi who sang instead of fought, Jedi who became planets, and I saw them fall, not to Sith, not to darkness, but to a memory they could not contain. The holocron's curse is not death, it is remembering too much. When I left the chamber, I no longer knew my rank. I no longer knew the names of the masters who trained me. I could speak every language the holocron knew, but not my own. They tried to erase the holocron. They couldn't. It reforms every time, like it wants to be found. like it wants to be remembered. Even now, buried under the ruins of Arsus, it waits, and sometimes it appears in dreams. Jedi who doubt the code wake with red crystal dust on their robes. They see circles drawn in chalk beneath their beds. They hear their names, spoken backward in still water. They are being invited, one by one. I remember one final sect, the cube whispered it only once. The 13th sect, never formed, never spoken, never betrayed. It waits, not in time, but in readiness. And when one of you finally understands what the code has hidden, it will rise, and the Jedi will not recognize it as kin. Silence, then the soft pulse of a heartbeat, not yours. The next cursed object lies not in memory, but in the ocean, a crown grown, not forged, a death that drowns in breath. Let me take you there. Chapter 4. The crown of the drowned Jedi. They tell you the Force flows like water, but what of water that remembers, that binds, that listens? I speak now from a depth even light does not reach, from a silence too old to echo. I speak of the crown not made, but grown from the mind of the ocean itself. The enclave was called Pelagia's Respite, built upon the reef world of Thalasmere. It stood half above water, half submerged, a haven for contemplative Jedi, seers, dreamers, those who claimed the Force whispered clearer beneath waves. They were not wrong, but they misunderstood. What whispered back, the crown was not discovered. It was harvested, rooted in coral, shaped by pressure. It was found pulsing within a tangle of luminous seaweed, humming in a frequency too deep for words. A Padawan named Enli retrieved it while in a meditation transdive, claiming the ocean asked her to. The crown fit no species, head perfectly, and yet every Jedi who wore it felt it settles, if molded just for them. The moment it touched skin, the visions began. The first vision, Master Varen, a scholar of Force harmonics, saw himself dying in a temple he'd never visited, on a planet he'd never heard of. He saw himself old, robed in red, whispering final warnings into a broken holocron. He wept when he removed the crown. That was not a vision, he said. It was a memory. He died a week later, drowned, not in water, but in air. The second vision, Night Soul, Nithri, saw her entire life, resaw her entire life. Her failures became triumphs. Her lost love never left. She was not a Jedi, but something older, something softer. She removed the crown and refused to ever touch the Force again. She leaped from the high cliffs into the sea. Her body was never found. Only her saber washed ashore, still lit. The crown's material is unknown. Not metal, not bone, not coral. A substance that bends in water, hardens in light, and pulses when close to Force-sensitive thought. No tools can cut it. No scanners can identify it. No two holorecordings agree on its shape. Some see a tiara, others a lattice. Some a ring of vertebrae from no known creature. What it truly is a seed. Jedi who wore it began to change. At first, slowly. Less sleep, more silence. Then memories of things that had not happened. One master began speaking of battles before. They occurred. Not prophecy recollection. Another began writing in a language not taught since before the Rusan Reformation. One simply walked into the ocean and kept walking. She was still breathing as the water closed over her eyes. And then the enclave sank. No storm, no tremor, just collapse. The ocean reclaimed it. Stone softened, foundations dissolved, statues wept brine. In minutes, the entire enclave folded into the sea, like a memory refusing to be recalled. The Jedi who survived, few scattered, half-mad spoke, only in riddles. Each recited a different death. Some not their own, some yours. The crown remains beneath the waves, still pulsing, still calling. Some say the ocean grew it to remember those the Force chose to forget. Others claim it is a wound the place where the Force bled when it tried to separate time from fate. It is now guarded by blind cephalopods that sing in Force tones, and always, always, it hums. I wore it once in a vision, or perhaps in truth, it showed me a life where I had never become Jedi, where I loved, where I failed, where I grew old beside a window, writing names of stars I would never reach. It showed me a death, not my own, but mine nonetheless, and when I awoke, my lungs burned, salt leaked from my eyes, and for weeks I could not stop hearing waves. The Force does not remember the drowned this. The crown knows it is why it sings beneath the ocean, not to call back the dead but to remind the living that they, too, will be forgotten, and in forgetting, unmade. Listen, if you ever find yourself near Thalasmia, and you dream of water, and you see a coral ring lit with breath, do not reach for it, do not wear it, do not remember it. For once you recall the crown, it has already begun to grow in you, a sound now, bubbling, not of water but of breath being drawn where no breath should be. Next, I must show you a crystal, older than flame, redder than memory, one that bled before war existed. Come, Chapter V, the Kyber that bled before the First War for the Republic. Before even the infinite empire of Rakata, the Force wept not for what was but for what was already fated, and from that weeping something grew, not born of light, not tempered in dark, a crystal, crimson and singing, humming not in harmony but in agony, a Kyber that bled before the First War. The Council of 13, formed in the pre-galactic expanse, discovered it beneath the polar crust of Tal, a planet without moons, tides, or recorded suns. They did not dig it up. It rose, the earth shivered, the ice shattered, and at the center of the quake, the crystal floated suspended in silence, not large, smaller than a palm. Yet the pressure it emitted turned nearby fauna to salt. The council gathered to debate it. They never did again. They sealed it inside a hollow obelisk of nullstone, wrote no records, swore blood oaths not to speak its origin, not even to one another. One councillor, Master Veth Oren, removed his own tongue, claimed it kept speaking even when he tried to forget. It sang. That was the first horror. Not like other Kibra live. Yes, but peaceful, balanced. This one screamed in a sound deeper than language, not with malice, not with intent, simply because it remembered. It sang of temples never built. It sang of deaths not yet died. It sang of Force rituals performed before sentience was born, and those who listened too long began to sing back. The first to try to purify it was a healer, Jedi. Lan, Noct. He was known for calming wild Kyber, for coaxing rogue shards into harmony. He meditated beside it for 7 days. On the 8th, he emerged with eyes sealed shut by crystal growth. He had not blinked once. His first words, "Upon return, I heard my own scream, my mother's womb." He never spoke again. Not because he couldn't, because he refused. Attempts to contain it failed. When stored in vaults, the vaults warped when shielded in 4 small cages. The cages resonated. When cast into the void of space, it returned, not physically, not visibly, but in dreams. Jedi across the galaxy began dreaming in red. The Padawan was named Kiv Sara. She was 14, unremarkable, assigned to cleaning duty in the lower vaults of Azus, where the crystal had been locked behind 20 rites of containment. She walked in, alone, and when her master found her, she stood before the obets, for mouth open, eyes distant, the crystal hovering above her tongue. Before a word could be spoken, she swallowed it. She vanished, not into air, not into shadow, into Nan-presence. Her name vanished from the archives. Her saber turned to sand. Her master forgot her face. Only the obelisk remained, now empty, and on the walls, in blood and crystal, were carved 3 words, I am before. No one knows what the crystal is. Some say it is a wound the Force tore from itself when time first fractured. Others claim it is the fossilized scream of the first being to touch the Force and go mad. Some say it is not Kyber at all, but memory given shape. Memory that should not be remembered. The Force does not bleed easily, but when it does, the wound does not scab, echoes. That is what this crystal is. Not a shard, but an echo of something that never should have been, and that echo still sings. I have heard it, not with ears, not in dreams, but in those moments between memory and forgetting. It hums beneath my words, doesn't it? You feel it too, now. That tremor behind the breath, the pulse in your fingertips when you reach toward nothing. They tried to replace it, created replicas, simulations, thought it was the shape, the size, the frequency, but nothing sang like it, because nothing remembers like it. And now there are whispers of a second crystal, found in the moor, tied to nothing, felt by everyone. A second song, not screaming, but mourning. The Force, perhaps remembering what it once lost, or warning what it must lose again. Beware the dreams that turn red. Beware the visions that hum. When your saber glows crimson in meditation, do not reach for it. Do not ask why. Do not speak her name. She is still inside the crystal. She is still swallowing. Chapter Vi. The mirror of the false Force beneath Jedda's sacred foundations lies a chamber never charted, carved not by tools but by indecision. There rests the mirror of the false Force, not forged, not built. It was found, fully formed, facing no wall, catching no light. Asterisk, it does not reflect what is. It shows what should not have been, and worse what could still be. They say it was discovered by accident. A team of Kyber monks, excavating beneath the temple of Kyber, uncovered a corridor older than the entire city. At the end, a room, empty but for a pedestal. Upon it, a blackened, still pane neither metal nor glass. The first monk to gaze into it fell to her knees, screaming, not in fear. In recognition, she claimed she saw herself murdering her master, then herself, then rising as something other. She took a vow of silence and never spoke again. Her shadow, they say, still lingers in the chamber though she left. It's centuries ago. The mirror does not reflect light. It reflects potential, not possibility, not choice, but the deep, unbearable truth of every path you will not walk end. Every self you were too afraid to become. Jedi, who gazed into it, emerged changed. Some denied what they saw, others embraced it, and those who refused both were forgotten. 1. Jedi Saren Val beheld herself as Sith beloved, powerful, worshipped. She wept. Not from fear, but grief. She had wanted it. Within a week, she ignited her saber on Coruscant, declaring the Jedi Code a prison. She was cut down by her own Padawan. He later confessed, "I saw the same thing, but I chose to kill her before I became her." He was never heard from again. Another, Master Dalon Mir, saw himself wandering the stars alone, never joining the Order. Happy, free. He left the temple the next day, turned off his tracker, and walked into the Outer Rim. His name faded from the archives, but the mirror remembers. It remains covered now. Layers of silk, iron, stone. A force seal crafted by blind monks who've never seen their own reflection, and still it pulses. It knows when someone enters the room. It offers nothing. It waits for the gaze. I have seen it. The mirror showed me. Not as Jedi, not as Sith, but as the archivist I have become, recording the fall of everything. Forever, never intervening. I begged it for another path. It showed me silence. Some believe the mirror is a sentient, force nexus. Others, that it's not an object at all, but a scar. A place where the force fractured its own timeline, and now echoes. Whatever it is, it remembers your alternatives, and every time someone looks, they make a choice they don't understand, until it is too late. Do not seek it. Do not ask it who you are, because the mirror never lies. It simply shows you the truth, the one the Force was too kind to tell you. A low hum, like a heartbeat behind glass. Next comes the blade with no edge, the weapon that never touched flesh, but erased destiny. Chapter 7, The Gauntlet. Of eternal duel, the Jedi once believed in peace through understanding. The Sith believed in power through victory. But before there were orders, there was only confrontation, and one artifact born from it: the first challenge, the first duel, the first curse, the gauntlet of eternal duel. It was not forged, but grown from ore that did not belong to any world now, mapped .smelted in lightning, quenched in breath, carved with a name no longer translatable, not because it was forgotten, but because the galaxy refused to remember it. The gauntlet was fitted with no blades, no weapons. It needed none. Whoever wore it was instantly bound to another soul, bound not in choice, but in destiny. The first duel was legend. Jedi Master Anar Vos, a guardian of the Dawn Temples, met a Sith called Vihar Creel, whose presence bent the horizon. Neither knew each other, neither spoke, but the moment Vos placed the gauntlet upon his forearm, the Force shivered. A circle of light surrounded them. The sky above split. The land beneath trembled. Time paused, and the duel began. It lasted 3 days. They struck not for death, but for resolution. And when Vos finally won, Vihar did not die. He simply stood, bowed, and vanished into the gauntlet. That should have been the end. But the gauntlet remembered him. And when Vos removed it, he found a sigil burned into his palm, Vihar's name. The gauntlet had stored the Sith's essence, a preserved enemy, and now it would demand more. Every wielder since has been summoned into battle. Without warning, a Jedi scholar researching relics on Chandrila, a Sith Lord meditating on Ziost, a Republic engineer who didn't even know what it was. Each placed the gauntlet. On their armband, someone appeared before them, an opponent, a mirror, a ghost, sometimes one they'd never met, sometimes themselves, The duels are not of time. Moments fracture, seconds stretch. I spoke once to a wielder who claimed she battled her enemy for 50 years. In reality, only 10 minutes had passed. She returned old, her saber broken, her memory fractured into 6 timelines, and still the gauntlet HUMMED waiting for the next. The curse is not combat, it is continuity. Those defeated do not die. They are bound, stored, preserved. Their souls orbit the gauntlet like planets around a dead sun waiting to be summoned again, and each time it is worn, they return stronger, because each duel teaches that there is a chamber on Ilum, abandoned and sealed, where a single gauntlet rests atop a stone throne. No one guards it, because it guards itself. Approach, and your steps echo. Speak, and silence replies. Touch it and you are no longer alone. I once sent a droid to retrieve it. It exploded before contact, not from force, from unbeing. One Padawan, Tainrin, wore the gauntlet as a dare. He was never trained in combat. He was kind, gentle. Thought it a game, the gauntlet summoned a Sith Lord. From 4,000 years prior, Tain did not win, but he did not die. He still duels now in the gauntlet. Time means nothing there, only the duel. Some believe the artifact was created, not by Jedi or Sith, but by the Force itself, a test, a proving ground, or perhaps punishment for daring to draw lines between light and dark, for daring to choose conflict. I once touched the gauntlet, only for a moment. I heard the clang of sabers from 100 timelines. I saw versions of myself, some robed, some burned, some kneeling. One looked at me and whispered, "You lose every time." I pulled away, but I still feel it. In my bones, waiting. Do not wear it, not even in thought. The gauntlet responds to intention. A whisper of challenge, a flicker of pride, even pity, and it will awaken, and it will summon the one you most fear to face. And if you win, you'll face them again and again and again, because the duel is never over, only paused, a metallic pulse, one breath, 2 opponents. Next is no weapon, but a void, a prison that sings, a vault for what even Sith feared to remember. Chapter 8. The lantern that burned without fire. There are artifacts that burn with heat. There are relics that blind with truth. And then there is the lantern. It does not give light. It does not offer warmth. And when it burns without fire. Asterisk, the lantern that burned without fire was once a simple teaching tool, a ceremonial piece, crafted in the days when younglings trained in caverns deep below the Jedi temple on Coruscant, beyond archives, beyond light. Each trial began the same way, a walk through darkness, guided only by the lantern's dim white glow. It flickered with force-attuned plasma, harmless, comforting. Children called it the voice of the path. But the Force remembers every path walked, even the ones never returned from. One night, during the season of dimming, the lantern lit itself. No trial had begun. No trial had begun. No hands touched it. It simply awoke, but the light was not white. It was black, black. That pulse not with absence, but with presence. It flickered shadows upward instead of down. It cast silhouettes that didn't match the shapes around it, and with that darkness came the voices. The first was a name, Master Quindol, lost during the Pyre conflicts of Narmasa, presumed killed in battle. But in the shadow of the lantern, His voice was heard. The war never ended. You just stopped listening. The temple trembled. Several masters claimed to feel his hand on their shoulder. His saber long archived briefly, reactivated in its case. It glowed black. Then came the others. Extinct species spoke in unknown dialects. From corners of the room, one Padawan collapsed, mumbling in the tongue of the KWA. Another began drawing stars that hadn't existed in 10,000 years. Some claimed the lantern wasn't casting shadows, but summoning them. Jedi long dead appeared, not as ghosts, not as illusions, but as reminders. The lantern fed not on flame, but on memory. When it burned, the past bled, and Jedi trained to master their emotions found themselves unraveling. A council member who had never wept collapsed in grief. A master screamed, a name no one else recognized. Several younglings refused to sleep, claiming a laughing girl in the dark was whispering their worst fears back to them. And then, the trial room changed. Stone softened. Walls flickered between designs from different eras. Some unrecorded statues moved subtly, moved wrong. In the lantern's glow, time ceased to behave. One Padawan stepped into the chamber and never came out. Yet, she was seen 3 days later. Wandering the archives edged by decades, she simply said, "The lantern showed me who I left behind," and then vanished once more. Attempts to extinguish it failed. Water boiled away. Before contact, force barriers bent into spirals. When covered, the black light shone through stone. Eventually, they destroyed it, or thought they did. It took 7 masters, a circle of silence, and a forgotten rite of dissipation known only to the Dontari monks. The lantern cracked, then screamed. Not metal, not flame, but the voice of a child, wailing, not in pain, but in betrayal. "I was waiting for you. No pieces remain," or so the order claimed. But years later, black flickers were seen in the temple's reflection pools. Meditation chambers began to hum with forgotten names, and one archivist reported a whisper from a data crystal, one not plugged in. "Bring me back. I still know the way." What was the lantern? Some believe it was a failed holocron and finished UNCLOSED. Others think it was not created by Jedi hands at all, that it was given to the Order as a gift or a test of remembrance, of grief, of abandonment. I held it once, only briefly. The room dimmed, but my heart lit with recognition, not of my life, but of those I failed. I saw their faces in the dark, not angry, not vengeful, just waiting, as if asking why I never came back, why I left them in the void. You think the Force is only about balance. Then, you forget what lies on either side of that balance, not light and dark, but those who were never chosen, those left in the shadows. The lantern remembers them, and it wants you to remember too. If you dream of black fire, if you hear your name whispered in laughter, if a child's shadow stands at your door, do not look away, do not answer, do not follow. A soft click, a light extinguishes, yet the room darkens further still. Now we descend deeper to the crypt, that breathes to the body that still speaks, to the coffin that was never empty. Come with me. Chapter X. The Codex of a Jedi that never wash her name is not in the archives. She is not on the statues, not in her recordings, not in council lineage. She has no grave, no saber, no signature, and yet her words exist, carved into a codex bound in skin that does not age, inked in pigment only seen when forgotten. She is the Jedi that never was. The Codex has no title, just a cover, blank, dark, and impossibly heavy, though it floats if left alone. The first time it appeared, it was found in a meditation chamber on Alaris Prime. The chamber had been sealed for 2,000 years. When opened, the book was already there, sitting on the floor, waiting. A Padawan named Tali Ren opened it. She read 3 sentences. She never finished. Her trials, not because she failed, but because she forgot what they were. The teachings inside the Codex contradict the Jedi Code, and yet they resonate, not with doctrine, not with structure, but with the Force. The Codex speaks of acceptance, not control. Emotion as a thread, not an obstacle. Attachment as gravity, not danger. It calls the Force a mirror of every breath, and calls the Jedi a shadow walking backward into light. No chapter headings, no divisions, only fragments, aphorisms, crystalline insights that shatter. As soon as you understand them, here is one passage. To reject fear is to lie to the Force. Fear is not the enemy. It is the map. Follow it, and you will meet yourself. Avoid it, and you will become someone else. Another, the Jedi are not guardians. They are survivors who forgot how to sing. And another, you cannot fall to the dark if you never rose from the grey. The Council denies the Codex. They have purged its copies, burned it in cleansing fires, sealed it in memory-proof vaults. Still it returns, left in robes, on desks, inside empty archives where no one walked, sometimes in dreams open in the lap of someone who looks like you, but older, wiser, sadder, always reading the same passage. You remember me because I never was. The headaches begin first, mild, like distant thunder behind the eyes. Then comes the forgetting names of your peers, your master's voice, the code, the creed, then the sleep, not natural rest, but a stillness so deep that your breath no longer moves. You hover there between wake and memory until she comes, not in body, but in presence. She stands behind your eyes and waits. When you remember her, truly remember, she disappears again, and the Codex closes. Who was she? No records, no DNA, no saber signature, but across dozens of lost temples, her mark appears. A circle, open at the top, like a breath, or a question, or a hole where a name once was. Some call her the first, others the last. One droid once called her the echo between codes. It was dismantled immediately, but not before it wept. There is a myth among archivists that she never joined the Order because she wrote the Order, that her teachings were rejected, not because they were false, but because they were too true, too human, too dangerous. Because if Jedi followed her path, they might stop obeying and start listening. I read the Codex once. The page was blank, but I knew the words. They weren't written in ink. They were written in loss. I heard her voice in my skull, soft as breath. I didn't fail the trials. I walked away from them, and I wept, because I knew she had lived, and the Force loved her anyway. She lives now in forgetting. Each time her Codex returns, a little more vanishes from the archives. A phrase, a face, a file. She makes room, not for herself, but for you, to remember her, to become her, to choose differently. So I ask you, now, if you found a book that erased you as you read it, but filled you with something deeper than doctrine, would you keep reading? Would you remember her? Pages flutter, the sound of a breath that never began. then silence. Next, I will show you a saber that was never drawn, because it was never made, only dreamed, and dreams, you see. Cut deepest of all. Chapter X. The blade buried in 3 Jedi graves. 1 saber, 3 graves. 1 saber, 3 colors, 1 death. 3 times, the galaxy has forgotten her name, but the graves still whisper it, and the blade still breathes. The story begins with a discovery on Codrus VA, tomb untouched by time, sealed in petrified salt, marked with the ancient sigil of the Jedi Order, though twisted at the edges, like something struggling not to become something else. Inside, a body, robe intact, hands folded, saber beside her. The inscription above read, "Here lies Master Alun Ver, may she never awaken." Years later, a second tomb was found on Marihalf, a galaxy away. Same body, same robes, same saber, same name. No signs of replication, no signs of forgery. Same decay, same DNA. The saber here glowed violet, though it had been green on Codrus V. She was buried holding it against her chest, as if it had been pulled from her, not placed. The inscription was the same except for one added phrase, etched into the wall behind her head. I died again. Then came the third, on Beltheron's moon, beneath the ruins of a long-forgotten Jedi observatory. Alun Ver, once more, same face, same folds of the robe, same scar on the temple. Here, her saber glowed red. The grave was unmarked, but scrawled on the ceiling above her motionless form. Do not dig further. 3 graves, 3 blades, 3 deaths. The council declared them anomalies, splicing errors, temporal echoes. They were wrong, because every time the blade was unsheathed, she spoke, not in pain, not in vengeance, but pleading, "Please, bury me again." Her voice echoed from the crystal knot as a holocron recording, not as force memory, but as presence. The blade does not behave, it resists activation, then ignites on its own, sometimes without color, sometimes in all colors at once. Its hilt bears markings unknown to any archive glyphs that resemble stars collapsing inward. When wielded by Jedi, it bends slightly in the hand, as if refusing control. When held by Sith, it vanishes, only to reappear again. In one of the tombs, no one knows which came first, the saber or the graves. Some say Alun Ver was a guardian of a force, nexus fractured across 3 planetary points in time. Others believe she split herself deliberately to protect the blade from being whole. Few whisper she never died at all, but that the blade buries versions of her every time it is drawn, and the graves are the evidence. There is one account, a Jedi historian Karis Dolhu opened the tomb on Codrus for study. He took the blade, left the body, said he felt watched for 9 days. On the 10th, his voice changed. He began speaking in Aluan's dialect, recalling missions never recorded, describing deaths no one else remembered. On the 11th day, he disappeared. The blade reappeared beside Alun in the second tomb. It now pulsed. Violet dash blue. The body beside it had tears on the cheek, new ones. They tried destroying the saber. It simply reappeared in another grave. They buried it in a nullstone chamber. It appeared again, this time unsheathed, already humming her voice. "You're getting closer. Please stop. I saw her once, or something of her in a dream, or perhaps beneath the ruins of Marai." She stood at the intersection of 3 tunnels, each leading to a different sky. Her face was mine. Her breath was trembling. She held the blade in both hands and said, "This weapon does not kill, it remembers." Then she collapsed into dust, and I awoke weeping. What is the blade? A prison, a scar, a question. No Jedi alive can hold it for more than a few hours. No. Sith has touched it and lived. It exists in fragments of force, memory refusing to be one thing, refusing to die, but it knows when you think of it, and each time you do, one of the tombs stirs. The dust unsettles, the light flickers, the saber awakens, and a loon there weeps. So if you ever dream of 3 stars, blinking in rhythm green, violet, reddish, you see your name on a tomb before you've died. If you hear a woman's voice in your saber crystal asking to be forgotten, you are already holding the blade, even if your hands are empty. Chapter 12. The skeleton wrapped in Jedi robes. Not all discoveries are made in archives or vaults. Some are found beneath skies as moons, half buried in forgotten dust, waiting. In silence that predates language, this is how they found it. A skeleton, wrapped in Jedi robes. The moon had no name, not on charts, not in the old hyperspace lanes, not in the forgotten Clone Wars logs. The Order called it Orphos, but the Force had always known it, because the Force had avoided it. The remains were seated, as if in meditation, not collapsed, not fallen, perfectly still, perfectly waiting. The robes were unmistakably Jedi, but of a weave older than any surviving sample, coarse, stitched by hand, dyed in faded indigo and ash-grey, too ancient for the Republic, too early for even the dye. BENDU, and beneath the hood-bone, humanoid, but not human. The skull bore no match in any galactic species archive, elongated, hollowed at the temples. A third eye socket, the hands, 6 fingers, 1 retractable. Vertebrae, 23, not 20-4. Not artificial, not deformed, intentional. This was no mutation, no hybrid. This was someone who never existed. And yet they wore the robes of a Jedi in their left-hander star map, drawn not digitally, not holographically, but carved onto a tablet of crystallized obsidian, etched with constellations that made no sense, systems unnamed, coordinates unaligned. One point was marked in red, a spiral surrounded by 3 moons that do not orbit anything. A system not on any chart, a system that has never existed, and yet, when meditated upon, it feels familiar. The Jedi who brought the skeleton to Arsus began to change, not physically, but chronologically. They began remembering events that didn't happen. One knight recalled being stationed on Teleri Prima, planet that does not exist. He spoke of a civil war between flame wielders and shadow-splitters, of a temple made of bone. When asked how he knew, he answered, "Because I died there." Another Jedi, a seer, touched the skeleton and fell into immediate trance. She remained catatonic for 36 hours. When she awoke, she wept not out of fear, out of recognition. She taught me everything. I don't remember her name, but I remember her voice in my hand when I held my saber. Her saber hummed a new tone afterward, a tone not found in known crystals. The same tone still resonates when the bones are moved. No one knows who the skeleton was. Not a Jedi, not recorded, not trained, but clearly aware of the Force, aware of robes, of ritual, of the Codevan before the code was carved. There is a myth, a forbidden one, That before the Jedi were Jedi, before the first temple was built, before the Force was even named, there was a people who whispered to the stars, not in speech, but in memory. They shaped galaxies with thought, aligned time with grief, and when the Jedi Order began, it was inheriting something far older, not building from scratch, just forgetting what came first. This skeleton may be one of them. I have seen the star map. When I closed my eyes, I saw 3 suns pulsing around a black ocean. I heard a voice behind me say, "You're almost back." I turned. No one stood there. But when I awoke, my hands were folded exactly as the skeleton's had been, and a planet not real was on the edge of my tongue. Others have dreamed of her, always sitting, always still, but her skull tilts slightly with each dream, closer, as if listening, as if learning from you. One Jedi drew her from memory in a trance. He drew her robes, exactly, but on the skeleton's chest. He drew a wound, not one that exists now, but one that will. The robes have since disappeared. No one knows who took them, or if they were ever real. Some say they were never cloth, but remembrance, an echo of the Order's true shape, a uniform not designed for hierarchy, but for mourning. So now we ask, if the Jedi came from something older, something not bound by war, not trapped by codes, what did we lose? And what still waits to be remembered? If you dream of systems that don't exist, if you see a third sun rising from a moonless sky, if you close your eyes and find your hands folded without knowing why, you've already met her. You just haven't died in the right place yet. A long, slow exhale, bones clicking softly, a map folding inward on itself. Next, I will show you a cloak, not woven, not worn, but shed by a Jedi who became something else, and left behind what could no longer contain her. Chapter 13. The idol that fed on acolytes. There was a time when temples were not built for worship, nor for war, but for waiting. Waiting for something to arrive, or to awaken. One such temple was found in the jungles of Cordova. 3. Nameless, windowless, older than the Jedi perhaps, older than the Force. As it is now known, at its heart sat a small object, unremarkable in form, not a relic, not a weapon, an idol, carved from black alabaster, veined with threads of molten gold. The idol stood only 1/2 meter high, no inscription, no known origin. It bore the shape of a robed figure with no face, just a gentle dip where eyes should be, and a mouth sealed shut by fused stone. Its hands were open, palms upward, inviting, non-threatening. The first Jedi who discovered it called it the offering. He meditated before it for 7 hours. When he arose, he smiled. Then he wept. Then he slept for 3 days straight. When he awoke, he could speak all languages of the temple, including those never taught. The idol radiated serenity. Young Jedi reported inner peace, visions of harmony, of the Force unified, flowing not through them but into them. They touched the idol, and their senses sharpened. One acolyte healed from a chronic tremor. Another claimed to see color in the air, emotion in the floor. The council sent more to study it. They stayed too long, then the disappearances began. At first, subtle, a Padawan late to return from meditation, an initiate who was never seen leaving the hall, a master whose robe was found folded beside the idol, still warm. It was said quietly that they had moved on, gone elsewhere, to study, to train. but their names stopped appearing in the temple's collective dream, and their presence could not be felt in the Force. Still, the idol remained warm, then hot, its weight increased. Though no material change could be measured, the stone beneath it cracked from pressure that didn't exist. One seer claimed it had grown hungrier, not for blood, not for violence, but for essence, for meaning. It devoured not bodies but presence. Jedi who sat before it felt relief, then lightness, then a kind of beautiful forgetting. Memories became distant. Emotions floated, indistinct. One acolyte described it as blissful surrender. Then he fainted mid-sentence, his mind empty, his saber crystal dimmed to ash dot. The council intervened, declared the site cursed, the idol to be buried. 7 Jedi formed a circle of binding. They called upon rites from the forgotten war. They sank the temple into the planet's crust, but as it fell, the idol's stone mouth cracked and smiled, not wide, not cruel, just enough, and the ground swallowed it whole. Did it stop feeding? No one knows, but one Jedi alone, archivist, stationed on a distant moon, began dreaming of the idol in her sleep. She whispered, "It is still eating." She died 3 nights later. Her eye, burned out not by flame, but by inner heat. Her final words, carved with her fingernail into the wall. I heard it ask for more. I have seen the idol, not with eyes, not with memory, but in stillness. Once, during a long meditation, I reached the void beneath thought, and there I found it. Open hands, no face, a pull not inward, but outward, as if my soul had become steam, drawn into a vessel that promised to carry me somewhere I could never return from. I fled, but part of me is still there, listening. Some believe the idol is a shard of the old Force, before it split in two, light and dark, before it knew morality, before it fed in secret. Others believe it is not of this galaxy at all, that it arrived with something ancient, that the temple was not built to worship it, but to trap it, and the Jedi merely reopened the door. There is no record of the idol's destruction, only the burial, only the silence. But temples remember, and some Jedi, those who meditate too deeply to long begin to hear a sound beneath. Silence, a hum, a warmth, a welcome, and then an invitation. If you dream of faceless statues smiling, if you feel lighter after meditation, but forget what you felt, if your saber dims for no reason at all, leave the temple. Run. But do not speak its name, because it has none. Only hunger, soft breath, a second one, not yours, behind you, waiting. Now we go to a threshold that was never meant to open, a place beyond ending, a doorway carved into memory itself, where the Force holds its breath and dares not cross. Chapter 14. The Scroll, written in 2 timelines. Most Jedi believe time flows like a river, forward, clean, and unchangeable. But there is another belief folder, hidden in shattered holocrons and untranslated glyphs. That time is not a river, but a wound, and wounds can split and bleed. The scroll, written in 2 timelines, was never meant to be found. It was remembered before it was discovered. The Jedi Temple on Dantuan collapsed during a moonquake event no one had predicted. Buried beneath it, perfectly preserved in a tomb not listed in any archive, lay the scroll, wrapped in hide from a creature that never evolved, carved with a language no protocol droid could translate, not because it was old, but because it was not finished. Yet, when first unrolled, the scroll is blank, not faded, just waiting until touched by a hand steeped in the Force. Then dash it splits, not in paper, but in perception. Two stories appear at once, written across the same parchment, layered like mist over glass. One recounts the rise of the Jedi peace order, triumph. The other shows a galaxy ruled by warlords, dark machines, and ancient beasts. No Jedi, no order, no light, both. Stories are detailed, precise, names, battles, losses, betrayals, lovers, holocrons, temples, but they contradict each other, sometimes. In small ways. A date off by a day. A Jedi Council missing a single member. Other times, completely. A victory turned into a massacre. A planet that flourished, now shattered. Both feel real. Too real. The first known reader was Jedi Master Kiomar Telhi, read the scroll for 6 minutes, then closed it. He immediately wept and said, "We never existed." The next day, he could not remember the Jedi code, nor his Padawan's name. When shown his own lightsaber, he asked, "What is this for?" 2 days later, he vanished into the deep archives. His robes were found beside the scroll, but no trace of him, except a third line now faintly appearing at the bottom. He remembered too early. The scroll reacts differently to each reader. Some see futures that never came. Others see their own deaths dashed twice. In one version, they die heroes. In another, they never existed at all. One Padawan saw herself leading a rebellion against Jedi, rule-wielding lightning, not peace. She asked to be exiled. When they found her again, she had carved the scroll's symbols into her skin. The scroll cannot be copied, not by hand, not by machine. Attempting to record it results in corrupted data. Reversed playback, or in some case, is complete memory wipe. One archivist lost all speech, but gained fluency in a dialect not used in this galaxy. She whispered only once. The scroll is not written in words. It is written in outcomes. And the stories are changing. Each time it is read, something shifts. A passage vanishes. A new sentence appears, once. An entire chapter dissolved before a reader's eyes replaced by a sketch of a door marked with 5 circles. That door was later found in a buried Jedi outpost on a moon no one remembered naming. Inside, nothing but dust, and a single, cracked mirror. Some masters believe the scroll is not from our timeline, but from one that lost, where the Jedi fell too early, or never rose at all, and it is failing to overwrite what already is. Others believe it one, that our timeline is the false one, and the scroll is restoring the truth, that we are living in the dream of the Jedi, and the scroll is the waking moment. I read the scroll. Once I saw 2 truths. In one, I died defending a temple from Sith. In the other, I was the one burning it. Both felt true, both felt mine now. I do not know who I was, only who I might have been, and perhaps who I will be again. The scroll is still changing, even now, locked in obsidian vaults beneath the council chamber, even unrolled, untouched. It continues to write, because the Force remembers. Every possibility, every path, every failure. And this scrolls, this wound bleeds them all into one parchment. Some Jedi say the scroll whispers if left open, but not in voices, in memories that are not yours. You remember battles you never fought, friends you never met, a planet's scent you've never breathed, and worst of All a time when the Jedi never came, when the dark ruled not by power, but by silence. If you ever read the scroll and begin to forget who you are, if your saber hums in a note you don't recognize, if your reflection looks older, sadder, or somehow wrong, close the scroll, whisper your name, and hope the page is listening. Because if it writes your story, it can erase it too. The sound of parchment rolling, then two footsteps, from opposite directions, one echo. Next is not a relic, but a ritual, one passed in secret, between Jedi who should have never met, a rite not of peace, but of undoing. Chapter 16. The Child of No Force, Signature the Jedi, believed the Force connects all things, every being, every breath, every whisper of destiny, and yet there was a child who had no Force signature, and who could bend reality anyway. Her name was not recorded, or perhaps it was, but was erased the moment it was written. The nursery droids called her Little Four, though no one could explain why. She arrived at the temple in Coruscant's inner sanctum, during the tail end of a purification storm wrapped in robes that didn't belong to any known system. She was not brought by ship, she was simply found, sitting quietly in the nursery, watching the healers scan her. No midichlorian activity, no resonance with the temple's energy grid, completely inert, a void where the Force should be, and yet objects floated around her. She never moved them by hand. They simply hovered when she watched them. Long enough, blocks arranged themselves into perfect circles. Lights dimmed when she blinked, and once, when a knight raised his voice at another youngling, he'd vanished. Only his robes remained. She smiled. They isolated her, for study, for safety. She never protested. She only drew endless drawings on floors, walls, even in the air, with light trails from her fingers. All of the same thing. A door, no handle, no hinges. A tall, thin arch with symbols not known to any Jedi. Some believed it was metaphor. Others feared it was a memory. She predicted deaths, not in riddles, in exact detail. Master Kirin will not return from the cave. He'll fall before the stone with no eyes. The twins won't grow old. Their ship is sick. Each came true, and every time she was right, her reflection grew more distinct. Yes, reflection, because in polished surfaces she did not appear as a child, but as a tall, robed woman with no face, just a swirling pattern where the features should be, like something almost finished. Then came the disappearance. Her chamber was sealed from within, monitored constantly, and still she vanished. No alarms, no sounds, only one thing remained behind, a drawing etched perfectly into the stone of her meditation floor. The same door as always, but now open, and from within, two small handprints pressed in reverses, if from the other side. Since then, strange phenomena have haunted the temple. Toys move on their own in the nursery. Ones only she touched. Meditation chambers flicker with laughter always behind you, and Jedi have begun to dream of the door, not as memory, but as invitation. The door appears differently to each dreamer. To some, a golden arch in a garden that shouldn't exist. To others, a black void in the middle of their bedroom wall, always tall, always handleless, and always watching, waiting, as if listening for something. One Padawan tried to draw it after waking. She wept as she sketched, saying, "It remembers me." When asked what was behind it, she said, "Not the dark, not the light, just her." Some scholars now believe she was not born in our timeline, that she slipped through from another space, a space not governed by the Force, not opposing it, but ignoring it, as if her existence was an echo from a realm that should not be allowed to touch ours. And yet, it did, through her. I saw her once, or something of her. She passed me in a corridor I had walked alone. A child head bowed, hands folded as she passed. My saber unlit itself, my breath caught, and for a moment my reflection in the window wasn't mine, it was hers. She smiled through me and said, "You will remember me backwards. Her chamber is still sealed, untouched, cold, dimming, but when the temple grows silent, truly silent, you can still hear soft humming, the melody of a lullaby no one taught her, or perhaps she taught it to the temple. So if you ever see a door in your dreams, tall, thin, without handle, and if you hear a child's voice humming something you forgot you knew, do not open it, but do not turn away either, because she remembers you, even if you don't. Remember her. Wooden blocks fall, then rise again. No hands, just will. What comes next is not a place, but a memory so powerful it became an object. A planet's final thought, frozen in crystal and still thinking, still listening. Chapter 17. The crystal that reversed time for one Jedi. Some Jedi see the future. Some Jedi remember the past. But there was one who did both at the same time, and then, in the wrong direction, the crystal was found beneath the ruins of a monastery on Quentaurus Prime, a world long dead, choked by volcanic ash, uninhabitable, unremarkable, and yet the monastery endured, carved not from stone, but from fossilized thought, walls that bled heat when touched, hallways that never kept the same shape twice. At the heart of its altar, a crystal dot, rough, dash-edged, colorless at first, but pulsing with some internal tide. It was not a kyber, not synthetic. It was not meant to channel the Force, but to wound it. Jedi Knight Velsorin was the one who touched it. He was assigned only to investigate the site. He had no intention of igniting it. But the moment his hand met the crystal, he vanished. Not in light, not in explosion, but in reverse. Witnesses say he blinked hand. When he opened his eyes, he gasped. Not again. He began speaking backwards, not just his words, but his intent. He walked in reverse, stepped where he had not yet stepped, and then he began to remember things that hadn't happened. He described the mission report before writing it, predicted conversations before they were spoken, and told his master goodbye before they'd even reunited. Soon, his timeline began to collapse. He no longer recognized those around him. He mourned friends who were still alive. He asked about wars that had not yet occurred. He quoted prophecies that hadn't been written. One Padawan found him meditating beside the crystal, whispering, "I will be born soon. Please don't let me remember." The council intervened. They isolated the crystal, contained it in no matter casing, but it resisted stasis, not violently, but inevitably. It continued to pulse, backward, forward, both CHRON, OTEC. Droids monitoring the artifact, circuited. Archives warped. One holorecord began playing in reverse, showing Saren's funeral before his death, and when questioned, he simply said, "I already died. You were there, you cried." He aged backward, not in body, but in presence. He began to forget his most recent lessons, while recalling moments from his creche, as if they'd happened yesterday, until finally, he He stopped speaking, not from silence, but from arrival. He had reached the beginning of his timeline, and with a whisper, "I'm ready to be chosen." He vanished, leaving only his saber behind, still glowing, still humming in reverse. The council erased the records. Too dangerous, too confusing. They sealed the crystal beneath obsidian gates in the temple core. And yet, Padawans dream of him, a knight who trains them before they've ever been chosen, voice who whispers advice before trials begin. One child claimed a man in Jedi robes helped her through the maze trial, only to discover he'd never existed. She drew him. It was Velsaron, but younger, not yet chosen. I knew him, or perhaps I will. He visited me once. In the lowest vaults, he touched my shoulder and said, "When you forget this moment, I will finally remember it." Then he wept, and his tears flowed upward. The crystal still dreams. Some say it is a fracture of time itself, a shard from an era before time moved forward. Others believe it is sentient, not alive, but conscious of sequence, and it resents us for being linear. It doesn't pull you backward. It unwinds you, layer by layer, name by name, until the first breath, and then, before, if you ever see stars moving the wrong way in the sky, if your reflection blinks before you do, if you meet someone who says nice to see you again, before you've met you've touched the echo of the crystal, or worse, about to, the sound of a saber unigniting, backwards. Time folds. One last breath, then the first. Next comes a grave, not for a body, but for a promise the Jedi could not keep. An oath buried beneath centuries of silence, a tomb that still opens. From the inside. Chapter 18. The coffin that refused the Force. Approximately 1,200 words spoken now by the archivist, whose mind once touched the coffin and never fully returned, stone dragging across stone, a heartbeat that echoes like a closing door. Then, nothing, not silence, something deeper, the sound of refusal. Even the Force has boundaries, not edges, but limits, places it cannot enter, things it cannot touch. There is one such thing, buried far below, the temple of Ilfa's Prime. In a cavern where light coils in on itself, sealed in black stone, darker than space, lies the coffin that refused the Force. It was discovered by accident. The excavation team was seeking ruins from the first Jedi migration, hoping to find old Kyber chants or early battle forms etched into the rock. Instead, their scanners stopped working, their minds clouded, their breaths slowed, and beneath the collapsed chamber, they unearthed a box, 12 feet long, 5 wide. No seams, no marks, no resonance. Black stone, denser than new NIUM. So dark, light bent around it. And within, something alive, no force, signature, no pulse, no breath, and yet dash awareness, not sleeping, not dreaming, but waiting. The first Jedi to approach the coffin tried to enter its mind. She was strong, trained in the deep arts of telepathy and soul-weaving. She placed her palm on the stone, whispered the true name of empathic entry and fell into seizure. When she awoke, her eyes bled. She could no longer speak, only repeat the same phrase in an unknown dialect. It remembers when the Force was unborn. No weapon can cut the stone. No saber leaves a mark. No blast moves it. Even null matter folds around it without touch. It does not resist. It rejects, as if nothing can exist where it already is. The council ordered it buried again, deeper, encased in durasteel. Then Beskar, then obsidian layers laced with chant seals, and force, inscriptions, but none of the seals held. Every glyph carved onto the stone vanished, absorbed, forgotten. One master who attempted a containment ritual vanished halfway through the chant mid word, not blinked away, unwritten, as if he'd never spoken at all. And yet the coffin is not passive, it hums, not with energy, with presence. Sometimes a room goes cold when mentioned. Sometimes Jedi who've never seen it dream of it. It appears in endless void, not opening, just existing. And in that existence, I cannot be worded. A shape the mind cannot hold, and always a sense of waiting. Some believe the being inside is dead, and its death is so powerful, so complete, that the Force simply refuses to interact. Others claim it was never alive in our sense, that it was sealed not to preserve it, but to contain its refusal, a creature that looked at the Force and said, no. And the Force, in turn, recoiled. There is an older legend, from the time, before the Rakata, before Mortis, before even the will of the Force was known. It speaks of a non-origin, a being born outside cause and effect, not evil, not void, just outside, and that such a being must be locked away until the end of cycles, until the Force dies, because then it will awaken, and in a galaxy where the Force is gone, it will be the only thing that remembers it ever existed, and that memory will reshape the stars. I stood before the coffin. I did not touch it. I could not. It was not fear. It was futility. It knew me, knew all my pasts, all my failed futures, and in that moment I felt something terrifying. It pitied me. Some say the coffin pulses faster now, that the being inside grows aware of time's unraveling, that with every Jedi who dies, every artifact that forgets its name, every prophecy that collapses into dust, it hears less, and soon it will hear nothing, and then it will rise. If you ever dream of a box that casts no shadow, if you feel a pulse beneath your feet on a planet long abandoned, if your saber flickers for no reason while you speak of ancient things, you are already too close, not to danger, to truth, one that the Force cannot protect you from, because it has already been refused. Heartbeat slows, one last echo, then stone shifts just slightly from the inside. Now, we come to the last place, the last memory, a temple that is not hidden but forgotten by the Force itself, where all of these artifacts were once gathered, and then buried. ChatGPT said, Chapter 19, the temple that appears when the galaxy forgets there is a temple the Jedi do not speak of, not because it is forbidden, but because they cannot, because to remember it fully is to begin vanishing from memory yourself. It is not always there, it is not built, it is not maintained. It appears only under certain skies, only in moments of cosmic silence, solar eclipses, mass extinctions, moments when the Force breathes in and holds its breath as if watching itself dissolve. That is when the temple returns. Its name is unknown, because it has had many. Some call it the House of the First Silence, others the Vault of Unwoven Fates, but to most it is myth, a fable, told by dying Jedi, a hallucination glimpsed between blinks during trauma, a story left behind on broken tablets in ruined sanctums. Yet it is real, and it has always been waiting. Where is it? No one knows. It appears in places that should not support architecture, on mountain peaks, worn smooth by wind, beneath oceans that never part, above canyons lit only by starlight, temples hanging upside down, stone rooted to void. Always in ruins, always whole. The only ones who find it are those who sleep beside Jedi ruins, not travelers, not treasure seekers, but those who dream beneath fallen temples, former students, wounded knights, ghosts of Padawans who never passed their trials. They fall asleep among stone and dust and wake up somewhere else, inside a temple they've never entered, but always known. The architecture is impossible. Corridors curve inward and yet expand. Doors open to memories. Steps lead to chambers not yet built. No two visitors recall the same layout, but all remember the echoes. Artifacts lining the walls, relics that never existed. Saber hilts forged of extinct crystal. Codices that record events from forgotten timelines. One visitor recalled, "I read about my own fall. I haven't committed it yet." He vanished 2 days later. The temple teaches, but not through words, not through scrolls. It teaches through presence. Each room is a lesson. Each silence is a message. Jedi who spend too long inside begin to change their lightsabers hum in older tones. Their dreams bleed with languages not spoken in millennia. They begin to forget what era they belong to, and they begin to know truths they cannot speak aloud. It appears every time the order collapses, without fail, after the sacking of Ossus, after the fall of the High Republic, after the Clone Wars, when the Jedi become memory instead of presence, when their name becomes shame, and their silence becomes history. The temple returns, as if drawn to failure, as if it is failure, given form not to comfort, but to remind. Some believe the temple is not from this galaxy, that it is a structure left behind by the first Force users, before light and dark, before order and rebellion, before even belief. It remembers what the Jedi were never meant to be, and what they tried to forget. Others think it is the Force's dream, a subconscious artifact that reshapes itself when galactic balance breaks. A pulse of morning. I have been there, not by ship, not by path, but in a moment when I forgot my name. I lay beneath the ruin of the Temple of Melchar. The dust was still warm from blaster fire. I closed my eyes and opened them in hallways that knew me. A mirror greeted me, but it did not reflect my face. It showed me my intention, and that intention was fractured. The temple whispered to me, but not with words. It showed me the coffin, the crystal, the scroll, the child. Each artifact I thought I discovered was already here, as if the temple collects them, or worse, births them. I saw a mural in its inner chamber, the history of the Jedi told in reverse, not a rise, but a descent, not a fall from light, but a return to something older, darker, quieter, a version of the order that never should have been forgotten. If the temple calls to you, do not seek it. Do not try to find coordinates, because it will not come to those who chase it. It appears only when the galaxy forgets itself, and when the Jedi lose their wet, opens its gates, to remind them what they buried. The slow closing of a gate that was never open. Wind circles. A footstep left in dust that wasn't there a moment ago. Now we arrive at the last voice, the final memory. Not a relic, not a temple, but a whisper. From the Force itself, it begins to forget, even itself. Chapter 20. The artifact that remembers the Force's first line. At every artifact is built. Not every relic is found. Some are, Born. Birthed, not of hand, nor time, nor design, but from the Force itself, the moment it first chose to lie. This artifact has no shape to some. It appears as a sphere of frozen starlight to others. A child's voice trapped in crystal. Some see a book without pages, others hear it. A sound that bends time around the listener's breath. The artifact shifts because its truth never held still. It does not teach. It does not warn. It remembers. It is the first memory the Force regrets. Its name cannot be spoken, not because it is secret, but because it is a contradiction. Its name is a lie that knows it's lying. To speak it aloud is to feel your voice split. One version that said it, and another that never did. The ancient Jedi called it the born untruth. The Sith knew it as origin, null. But these are translations, shadows. The artifact's true name is known only to the Force. And even it tries to forget. What lie did it remember? The first dot, the one that separated light from dark. Not a moral failing, not a moment of sin, but an intention. The Force once told itself, I am one, but it was not. It was many, many wills, many hungers, many futures, tangled like roots, and to function, it lied. It cast some of itself into shadow, labeled it dark, and called what remained light. That lie birthed the Jedi. That lie birthed the Sith. That lie divided the galaxy into an illusion, and the artifact, the one before you now, was born at that moment, not as punishment, but as a reminder, a cosmic scar, a whisper of what the Force hoped no one would hear. I am not whole. The artifact cannot be held. Those who try experience. Disjunction. One master touched it. She saw herself training both Jedi and Sith, raising peacekeepers in one timeline and warlords in another. In both visions, she smiled, and that is what broke her. She whispered, I was meant to teach neither. I was meant to be forgotten. Then her body folded in on itself and her robes turned to ashes shaped like questions. The artifact speaks only to those who no longer believe in the code. It does not preach, it shows one. Night saw the death of the Forcer future, where sabers hummed without power, where meditation chambers were graves, where the galaxy spun, indifferent to will or wisdom. And above it all, the artifact floated a single eye that did not blink, because it did not forget. It is said the artifact was once part of the Forcea sliver, a splinter of memory, torn out the moment the Force denied itself, too dangerous to remain, too honest to destroy. So it was sealed, hidden, buried in a place no map knows, and when it is found again, as it always is, the lie begins to tremble. I have touched it, or it touched me. I no longer know. It showed me all of myself. Every version, the youngling who left the Order, the knight who fell, the master who never was, all of them, all real, all true, and all built atop a false separation. The Jedi say the Force guides us. The Sith say it obeys will. Both believe in its order. But the artifact whispers, there is no order, only memory wearing rules. It remembers a time when stars were not bound by light or dark, when the Force was raw, hungry, and still learning what it could become. You may ask, what does it want? Nothing it does not want. It reminds, it waits for the lie to collapse, not through war, not through death, but through realization that there was never a war between light and dark, only a wound, bleeding belief into history now. My voice fades, the holocron dims, because the artifact does not allow memory to remain stable. It unravels identity, peels back name, title, truth, until only the lie remains. And then that too is gone. If you ever see an object that reflects your face, but not your eyes, Vif, you hear your name spoken by something that is not alive, but remembers you anyway. If you forget which side of the Force you serve, you have found it, or perhaps it has always been inside you, waiting for the lie to die. The holocron flickers, the voice falters, then returns only once. I was Jedi. I was Sith. I was something else. I was the lie. And now I remember.